Today we've got another knockoff carburetor to talk about, but before we do that, I owe you guys an apology, so let's get to that right away, and then we'll take a look and see what this thing is. 2 weeks ago, a friend sent me a link to a knockoff carburetor and said, hey, if you ever get a chance to put your hands on one of these, I'd like to see a review of it. Well, I started poking around on the website, and I did something I promised I would never do, but the price was so ridiculously cheap, which has me confounded, that I just went ahead and bought this one. Now, this one is through Temu, however the heck you say it. The retail price was $265, something like that, $269. But with some promotional codes, and I think this is one of the first ones that they've sent out, I got this carburetor for 89 bucks. So I said, what the hell? It's worth it to see what it looks like. I feel really bad about purchasing one of these, but hey, I guess if we can take a look at, I'll give it a fair shot. I get accused very frequently of being a made in the USA homer, and I don't give these things any credit. So we're going to give this one some credit, and we'll just judge it by what it is, and I'll give you my final thoughts at the end. But before we get started with this one, I noticed, sorry, address label, everything covered up. I noticed that there is some hardware rattling around. So whatever is in here, I did cut the open so I could get to it and open it up quickly, but I haven't popped the top off. So there's some hardware loose in there, but I don't think that's going to be any big deal. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we got. All right. Yep, you guys have figured out what it is now. Oh my God. Okay. I see what all the hardware is. So let's take a look at that. I really hope this is, these are extra jets. We'll talk about all that in just a second, but, well, it did have a bag for it. Apparently it didn't make it from China, so that's interesting. But there's a lot of hardware in here. Let me do this because it'll take forever, I think. Let me dig it all out. I'll clear the bench off. That way we can take a look at it. But yeah, funky. Before we get too far down the line on the carburetor, we just might as well go ahead and look what's in this kit. Kind of interesting, but one thing I notice about these knockoff kits is they always try to go above and beyond what's in the normal or carburetor kits that they're knocking off, which understandable, but there's something that gets lost in the translation because some of these things don't quite make any sense. Like, I like the fact that they're trying to give you some jets for this. Makes sense. Nice deal. I guess that's kind of a cool deal. Those are the numbers that are on the side of the jet, so we're going to have to pin these to see what they are. I'm assuming that's a 65 jet. I don't know what the 200, 195, or 205 means, but we'll pin those later once we get the jets that are out of the front of these things, and see if that's if that tells us what size they are. Air cleaner stud, stud for the throttle linkage and all that. Here's one that threw me off as I was looking at that, because I thought, okay, that's cool. They give you a power cable for the electric choke. There is no electric choke on this carburetor. So, yeah. Again, I think that gets lost in the translation. They see that over and over and over again because the carburetors that they are looking at to try to knock off, they just assume that that's supposed to be in there, I guess. But that's a manual choke carburetor. We'll talk about that in just a second as well, too. But anyway, I'm going to set all this aside. We'll start taking a look at the carburetor, and we'll kind of go from there. But right now I'm confused about what those jets are. So we'll see. We'll come back to that, I guess. So first impressions are always pretty, I think, telling on these carburetors. But yeah, I'm a little confused by some of these things. So let's just start knocking some of it out here. Again, it looks like a standard 4160 style 80457, 1850, whatever carburetor you're used to. That looks pretty standard. I guess they're trying to mimic that. Really hard to tell. But there are some interesting things that stick out here. One, obviously, with the non-electric choke, but including a power cable for the electric choke. That's interesting. This is a manual choke carburetor, but this does not lock over at all. Let's take a look at the underside real quick. Transfer slots, slots for the idle mixture screws. Those are interesting in some different spots. I'm assuming that's what those are there for. Yeah. Again, I never quite understood why they do these on these carburetors, but the hardware just sucks. We'll start pulling some of these. We'll see if they got smart and staked these so they don't come out. We'll try all that here in just a quick minute. But interesting here too, they do give you some adjustability on the circuits. I'm assuming that's the idle circuit and wide open. That would make the most sense. It's on both primary and secondary side. So that's interesting. Typically those carburetors, the 1850 or the 80457 don't have that adjustability, so that's interesting. Again, no paperwork with it, so they don't tell you anything about it. They don't tell you what those jet sizes were. I do like that they give you a reference point in there to see what the float setting is, so that's not a bad thing, I guess. It's kind of cloudy. We'll have to look at it one other day here on a car. Interesting on the idle mixture screws there, how those are. They're kind of shrouded. We'll take a closer look at that here in just a second. But yeah, there's some interesting things going on here. Let's just start tearing it apart and see if we can find out some more. Another detail I'll give you a close-up shot of here. Just notice that the throttle shafts are bushed, at least on that secondary. It's hard to tell elsewhere, but yeah, we'll take a look at it and see if we can see if they're bushed on both sides. But that's a bonus. That's an upgrade if they decide to do that. That's not a bad thing. So, okay, let's start tearing this down. Answering another quick question. The hardware here is an 8mm, so at least that's the closest. So I'm going to assume that these are metric. Not surprising. China is on the metric system. So one thing I noticed right away is, wow. Okay, this may be a really bad idea, but let's see if that is flammable. That is coated in there. I have a fire extinguisher right behind me, so let's see. I think that what they did is they used just a standard or Stoddard fluid to test that. It's what it kind of smells like. It's a little off, but used it for leak testing. I don't think. Yeah, it's not in the accelerator pump, so I think what they did is they just filled it up with that Stoddard fluid just to verify that it didn't leak and dumped it back out of there. So maybe that's something standard they do on all these. I don't know, but certainly something to be aware of. I don't like the feel of that. It's very weird, and so I'm just going to assume that that's what they used on it with Stoddard. Let's take that power valve out. Let's see if it's got any markings on it. Kind of interesting that Stoddard fluid is everywhere, and it's really soaked that gasket. What they didn't do is these are like a cork type of gasket. We'll see in a couple of days. I'll let this dry out and see if I can pull some of that fluid out of there, which I don't like that, but that fluid has soaked that gasket on the power valve, and it's stuck itself to there. So if you're going to make any changes with that, be prepared to, I guess, try to find a gasket set. We'll compare those to some gaskets off camera. One thing on this power valve is there is no markings on it. I thought that there was a slight marking there, but it's not really. I got a magnifying glass out, and there's no marking on it. So I guess you're just supposed to assume this is a 6.5 power valve. With no numbers on here, it's really difficult to tell. That's kind of surprising to me. Usually they mark that kind of stuff really well. We saw that on the Jets, how well they were marked. So let's pop a Jet out of there and see if we can find anything marking wise. The Jets were Elephant Man tied in there, which I never understand why they do that, but for whatever reason. Interesting thing on the Jets, there's no numbers or anything. I pulled both of them out of there to see if, grabbed the magnifying glass, even see if the old eyes were deceiving me. There is no number on these Jets. So let's do this. Let me push some of this stuff back. We'll get some of the other Jets over here and let's pin these, see if we can determine what size they are. I have no idea. Let's see if we can figure out what size these are. So yeah, 71 is loose. I wouldn't call that great, but it's enough if 71's not fitting. So stock Jets that are in it are a 71. Okay, I guess that makes sense. I don't know what the 80457 is jetted at. So let's see if these are at 65. Pull the 65 pin. Oop. 65 doesn't go in there. 64 is what slides in there. So, okay. So we've got that dialed in. So we know that that's accurate. So that's a 64. That is odd. So whatever the 165s are, they actually pin at a 64. So let's go ahead and let's see what the 200s are. I don't even know where to start with the 200s. Let's just say they're bigger. That is interesting. The 200s are actually a 78. So, all right. I don't know where they came up with that. So, interesting. Let's see what this 95 is. So the 195 is actually a 76 size on the Jet. Let's see if they're an 80. And they're an 80. So actually, if you want to get technical. So, all right. What does that mean? Oh, why am I getting brain fog over this? There's no rhyme or reason. If you can figure out the rhyme or reason what they're trying to do, drop it down in the comments, please, so you can help a poor old guy out. But I'm not understanding what the number value is on these. Doesn't make sense. The closest one that made sense is the 165 pinned to the 64. That would make sense, I guess. So it does give you some up or down movement, more fuel on the upside with the 76 versus the 71, and one leaner Jet size. Interesting, but don't know what to think of that, but that's at least what they pinned out to. Let's keep moving. There's something else I want to show you on the metering block here. This one might take me a few minutes, but I'm going to power valve channel restrictors, these idle circuit restrictor. I'm going to pin these emulsions. They're not threaded. These are kind of, it's brass, but it's pushed in there, so it's not something you can remove. So let me do this off camera because it's going to take me a few minutes. I'll start pinning these, and we'll talk about some of the important ones and see if we can figure out what the heck they did here. Here's something I noticed right away as I was doing these. This is the Temu metering block. This is one out of an 1850 Holley. Look at the weight difference on these two. 180.6 on the Temu. 180. Now here's the Holley 1851. 429.2. Wow. I mean, that has some heft to it. It is dense. This thing is, I don't know what that material is, but man, they are physically same size, essentially. I'm assuming they do the exact same things. I just thought that was kind of interesting as I was doing the pin measurements on this, so I'll keep finishing that up, but I wanted to show you that real quick before I forgot about it. Very heavy, very light. There are some interesting differences between these two sets of metering blocks. So it's a little interesting. You know, the power valve channel restrictor, pretty close, but they're a little different. Okay, I'm not too worried about that. Accelerator pump discharge, that's kind of weird. You know, that's it's so small. But the pickup is the interesting one to me. They're always generally a little smaller. Holleys are really close, I guess. But I found that weird that the Temu one was a much larger pickup and the discharge was smaller. Kind of a weird one. The emulsions were really interesting as well here too. The Holley was what I expected it to be on the lower emulsion, and then larger on the top side. But the Temu one's interesting because it's got 3 different emulsion ports in there, which makes sense looking at the top side of the carburetor and the idle air bleeds that are up there. Those work in conjunction together. But those being pretty close to the same, not really too concerned about that, but I did find it interesting, I guess. The transition slot pickup was interesting as well, too. Much smaller on the Temu. Holley, it's kind of where I guess I expect it. To be honest with you, I don't measure these a lot unless I'm working on something that is more of a custom and I need to understand the channel size and will it work for the fuel and the power that we're asking a carburetor to deliver. But if you're working on a standard Holley type carburetor or now Edelbrock carburetor in that 4150 style, it's going to have generally the channel size that you're going to need for what you're working on. It's when you start building something. But the Temu one's just, I don't know. I mean, I could go on the main body and start measuring there as well too. But it's, I don't know. These numbers are confusing to me because if this Holley is a 600, which it is, it's based off the 1850 carburetor. That's what that block is out of. What is the Temu? It says it's a 600, but in every instance, we're not really up to the same standard that the Holley is. That has been very proven throughout the years. Be some time on the dyno or time cruising and monitoring AFR to see, you know, how it works in transition, how those emulsions work at different RPMs, and you know, the accelerator pump discharge, power valve when it opens. Does it, you know, is the Temu a little bit leaner? Don't know. We'd have to test that and find out. But right now, when you base the two, not really happy with the results. It's kind of interesting. This carburetor sat, unfortunately, for a few weeks while I was doing something else, and it is still full of that Stoddard fluid, which, I mean, that's what it smells like. I am assuming that's what it is. We have jets in this secondary side, which understood. I mean, you know, Holley's made that rear metering block upgrade for the vacuum secondary carburetors for quite a while for the 80457 and the 1850. I believe it fits, but having jets in the rear is interesting. Pop that apart and see what it looks like. More of that Stoddard fluid. You can kind of see what I mean by that. You can see how much that is swelled, and I don't dislike the fact that they wet tested this. I like that, but it just makes those gaskets much more complicated. Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, they want to kind of control the fueling there. Not really how that's done, but interesting to have that metering plate like that and have the ability. Let me get another one of these and see if I've got one laying around and we can kind of look at it side by side. Okay, here's the one on the 1850 on the left, and then here's one on the Temu. Yeah, kind of interesting. We'll have to maybe pin that and just see, but could be the reason why also too that they offered those other jets, but I can see what they were potentially thinking, you know, in being the metering fuel restriction here on the rear out of the Holley. They pull it right from the bottom. Potentially that's what they were looking to do there. Can't really say what their thought process was, but yeah, as far as pinning some of these things, we could pin the hole there if we want to take a look at it, see if they're typically the same. But this one looks like it's going to pull a little bit more fuel. Yeah, my old eyes can't really tell that, but yeah, it's just an interesting way to do it. I don't know that I disagree with it, but it's not like it is a full metering block that will allow you a lot of adjustability out of the rear. But one thing I'll never understand is why they use that hardware with the lock washer on it. It's just cheap, not very good. I've always complained about these, and Jesus, this one's no different. That hardware, it's not staked. Looks like they may have tried to put something on there, like a Loctite material, but that's just awful. You know, that's the bottom side of that that carburetor, and at some point, if that decides it's going to vibrate itself loose, guess where it's going? Straight down the intake manifold. So I do have a couple of unopened rebuild kits, and I did crack one open just to see if this gasket matched up with anything in the off-the-shelf rebuild kit that I had from O'Reilly's. Doesn't match up at all. So you're a little stuck with that. You're going to have to make your own gasket. I didn't really look too closely at the metering block and the bowl gaskets, but metering block would be the one that I'd be the most concerned about. So I'll verify those here in just a quick second. But yeah, not you're a little stuck if you need to do a rebuild on this. You're going to have to do some modifications of some gaskets unless they come out with a knockoff, replacement gasket set for it. So we're running a bit long on this one, and honestly, I've reached a point where I don't really care anymore. There are some things that I didn't totally completely dislike. You know, I thought it was interesting to have the sight glasses in there. That's kind of cool, I guess. There's a lot of little detail here that was a little confusing, adding the jets to the secondary metering plate. Yeah, I just, it is what it is. I get beat up pretty hard for being so, walking into these being so negative on it without looking at it with an open mind. But here's the thing. This is a knockoff of an existing Holley carburetor or something similar to a Holley carburetor. It doesn't deserve respect right out of the gate because of that. It deserves what it is. It is a something that they're trying to steal market share from an existing U.S. brand that regardless of whether the patent is run out on it or not, doesn't really matter, and it hurts an American company. Now, a lot of you, based on the comments that I've gotten out of these videos are done, don't care about that. They don't care that, anything being American made. They don't care that it hurts a U.S. manufacturer. All they care about is what money they can save with a knockoff product. Just know that if you do that, that there is going to be a lot of challenges along the way. There's some things that are unexplained, and maybe with with a little bit of data logging, with a little bit of AFR, maybe you'll realize that this wasn't the most exciting thing ever. Hardware's always been an issue with these. You name it. We've looked at enough of these now. Unfortunately, I have one more of these to do here soon that I recently picked up, but it's kind of go from there. So make your decision based on, I'm a little ashamed again that I purchased this one, but it was kind of the most intriguing one that I saw, and given that the price was so ridiculously cheap with the coupon and the way we purchased it, it was worth it, I guess, to look at it. So would I buy this? Absolutely not. Would I buy it even if it was a superior upgrade knockoff to an American-made Holley brand? Absolutely not. But again, that's my opinion. You can make yours if you want it. So anyway, got any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Don't be too spicy on it. You can leave your opinion. I may disagree with you on it, but please don't take that as a personal attack. That's me sticking up for an American-made company. So yeah, we're going to leave this one right as it is. I will put this back together eventually somewhere down the road. If I'm really, really bored and have nothing else to do, we'll test it out and see how it runs and drives. But I already had plans to do that on some of the Edelbrock knockoffs. Yeah, eventually maybe we'll run this on a car and see how it is. So anyway, keep the comments as civil as possible. And yeah, sorry to waste your time with this one, but it is what it is. Thanks for guys for watching. We'll see you on the next one.